Patch 1.2 of Zenless Zone Zero is coming to a close, and with it, a lot of cool things were introduced into the game. So before the new patch arrives, I thought I'd take a moment just to look back and see just how much the devs cooked with this patch, or how much they didn't cook. I think it's pretty obvious to say though that this will be very highly opinionated, so don't take this as like a matter-of-fact thing. Of course, you're welcome to have your own opinions, and you're more than welcome to share them down in the comments below. But with that out of the way though, let's start off with arguably the most important thing to me is the story and the lore. Yes, that's right, I do actually read the story. I don't just mash through the text. So for me, the story was alright. In comparison to 1.1, I think I was very happy that we were a lot more involved, since this was technically speaking, a main chapter, as opposed to it being a special episode like 1.1 was. That was my main sort of issue with 1.1. Not to say that it was bad, but it is nice to see that we were more involved. Again though, this does make me wonder if 1.3, being a special episode, is also going to again barely feature Phaethon in it. But I mean, hey, maybe less time for us means more time to see Yanagi and, the rest of Section 6, so maybe there's a good trade-off to be had there. But coming back to the story again, the whole point of 1.2 was that Perlman had escaped to the Outer Ring, and then he got caught by the Sons of Caledon, and then it was up to us to then go and find them to find information about it. But the thing that sort of annoyed me was that it started off with us finding out about Perlman and then going there, with the intent to find out more about him, and then he was never brought up in the entire story right up until the very end, and even then it was just like a bullet point of like, oh yeah, and by the way, we still need to find out more about him. It was as if we went there and then we got super sidetracked on this completely different story, which again, to be fair, it was a very nice story. The whole rise of Caesar King becoming the Overlord was still pretty cool. And also, I guess, I don't know how much it's going to be tied in, but, those guys that were plotting behind the scenes, that infected Pompeii, maybe that might become part of a bigger thing, who knows? But it was a bit sad to see that it wasn't, really progressing through the main story that much. And then in terms of gameplay, obviously, the big thing to talk about is that there were no TV sections, and I didn't really mind it. I know I have been quite an advocate saying, they shouldn't really remove it entirely. Although I couldn't help but think in certain parts of the game, during different combat stages where you would defeat a group of enemies and then you'd have to run from one area to the next, I just thought to myself, yeah, this is where they would put a TV section. And I mean, for the most part, it ended up being the same, right? It was just some downtime where the characters could yap between each other as you run from one place to the next. Although I can understand that it was nice not having to hit a loading screen every time between the fights, and then also having to deal with what used to be very sloggy movement in the TV section. So it did make the pacing of the story a lot more smoother. Like, I pumped out the story in 3-4 hours, I would say. I will say though, the one sort of, not really TV mode section, but the departure from the combat and stuff was the bike riding sequence, which that was something. When we first saw the bike riding sequence in the live stream showing off 1.2, I remember I was like, yo, bike riding, that's cool. And then it got to the actual part where we played it in game and I was like, oh, bike riding, that's cool, I guess. Honestly speaking, I think you could probably just step away from your computer or from your game for 5 minutes and it would autoplay itself. It was like a knockoff Subway Surfers where riding into obstacles didn't really matter that much in the end. However, for me, the absolute highlight of 1.2 in story and lore has nothing to do with Sons of Caledon even. It was the final reveal. When Phaethon go up to that fence there, the memorial site, I was actually doing the absolute cinema reaction there. Having them finally address the lore behind Old Eridu and before the collapse and all that stuff, which for those of you who have been keeping up with lore, they did release a video about the city defenders and how they fought for the Old Eridu before the collapse as a separate video before the game even released, but to have it be confirmed now in game and having them bring it up, it was so cool. Of course Miyabi was also there, which was cool, whatever, but having Bell and Weiss mention, that they're gonna try and find their professor who's somewhere there in the hollow or whatever. I don't think people realize just how absolute cinema that moment is, because this was sort of alluded to back in, I think, chapter 2 with the Victoria housekeeping, where when Rena speaks to Eos and she has a moment with him and we go up to her, Rena says, oh, I was just speaking to Eos about the previous master that he had. And then at that point we're like, wait a minute, Eos had a previous master, so somebody before us? Interesting. We never really know who that is. When Phaethon go up and they say, oh, we're gonna look for our old professor, we know thanks to the lore video that professor is Professor Archie, founder of Helios Academy, which is very likely the same professor that, taught Bell and Weiss. And in turn, it was very likely the previous master for Eos, because Professor Archie has gone missing. And what's more is that for you Greek mythology chads out there, you would know that Phaethon is the son of Helios in Greek mythology. And in Greek mythology, Phaethon at one point goes to like confirm that he is the son of Helios by going to his father's like domain, which in this case is kind of like Belle and Weiss saying that we're gonna go back into the Hollow to find Professor Archie. It's actually absolute cinema. I cannot wait for them to expand upon this topic more and more. Like, forget about Perlman and all that stuff. I want to know more about this. I'm sure they'll tie it up together, but I want to know more about this old Eridu and the collapse and Hollow Zero and all that stuff. But alright, enough about the lore and the story. Let's talk about the characters, which I know not everyone can really like have an opinion on because maybe not everyone pulled for both of them, but I myself did get both Bernice and Caesar. Caesar, I was absolutely in love with, like, since the moment she was revealed in the initial trailer, before we even knew who she was and stuff like that, just showing off all the factions. But even aside from Caesar and Bernice, who were obviously the focal points, the story also gave some nice characterization to the rest, like specifically Lucy. The whole Lucy and Caesar, you know, fighting for power and who's the real leader and all that stuff was really cool. Especially as well, getting to see Lucy's boars, Woody, Bricky, and Grassy. I just love them. I think Zenless Zone Zero has done a great job on like making very marketable mascots, you know, the Bang Boos, the boars and whatnot, arguably even Officer Mew Mew. And then yeah, also there was the, aside from the main story, there was the agent story which featured Bernice and Piper, and all I can say for that is screw the government. Even though I pay my taxes, well, it was like 70% or something from the lottery winnings in the agent story. I guess it makes sense as to why the Sons of Caledon want to go to the Outer Ring and not be in the city. And then as for the quality of life stuff, of which there are quite a lot. Like there's actually a lot of just really nice quality of life stuff. So obviously the first thing to talk about is the battery overflow system, which means that now you don't have to stress as much about logging in every, you know, couple of hours or so. Yes, technically speaking, you are losing efficiency if you are like overcapping your stamina, but at least there is that like buffer of saying, okay, I'm not getting the most, but I don't have to like drop everything I'm doing to log on just to like, you know, spend my stamina. I'm still getting some back at least, which I think is very useful for those of us, which I imagine is a lot of us, that, you know, have very busy lives, that have jobs and stuff like that, and we can't really afford to plan our day around logging in at specific times just to, you know, do one quick HIA run or something like that. The other quality of life thing, which is, I know, being expanded upon, and it's not going to come out in full until 1.4, but that is the ability to choose different characters to walk around in. And I mean, it's alright, I guess, you know, for the gooners out there, you get to switch into like Bernice or Caesar and watch their physics in play. But what I want specifically that when you switch characters and you use the camera, you're able to use the selfie mode and then like emote how you would with Belle and Weiss. I'm sure that's probably something they're working on, but it would be really nice. Next up is the squad configuration stuff. So obviously the preset teams is very nice, but I mean, it's not really that much of an issue because I feel like the first time you do one of these farming stages or whatever, you make one team, and then every time you go back into that specific stage, your previous team is loaded up. So I honestly don't really use the team presets that often because my teams are basically already set for each different farming stage. However, the squad swap feature in Shiyu Defense is so nice because sometimes I feel like they do it on purpose, where in one stage they would put enemies that are like weak to say fire on the first half and enemies weak to something else like ether on the second half, and then in the very next stage they're swapped for no apparent reason whatsoever. And it's not like it makes a difference about which side has the fire weak enemy, it's just to annoy you to have to reshuffle your squad around. So being able to just quickly flip your squad around is so nice. Oh, and then the last thing is the fact that we can farm notorious hunts as much as we want now at the cost of extra stamina is so nice. Because now we're no longer time gated behind stuff like that. Because if you don't pre-farm for somebody soon enough, then you're sort of like stuck with not having them at their highest, core passive skill. That in combination with the monthly boxes that we can buy from Scott Outpost is very nice to help us stock up on materials for upgrading characters. And then as for the new content that was introduced into the game, aside from obviously the main story, we have the Cheesetopia event, which is actually going to be a permanent addition to the game. Obviously the limited time rewards, so that's like the free Lucy, aren't going to be available permanently, but it is nice that if there are any new players that join in later on, they still get to experience the fun of the Cheesetopia event. Which I mean makes sense, right? Like devs go and put the effort into making the event, and like it was a pretty highbrow event as well, you know, with not just the mini games of stacking the different food stuff, but there was also like combats and stuff like that that you'd have to go through. Things were being fully voiced as well. It's nice. It's nice to come to this as opposed to like from Destiny 2, where people complain so much about things being sunset and, you know, people pay for content only to have it be removed from game. So yeah, it's nice to have that be permanently added. Aside from Cheesetopia though, there was also the new Hollow Zero mode, the Blitz mode, where obviously everyone was complaining about TV mode. So they said, you know what, no TV section, you just go and do battle after battle. It was alright. The one thing that like stuck out to me in Blitz mode is that in the second, I think it's like the Enforcer or something that you fight, after the first group of mobs, there's no flash indicator for his attacks, which was something that really caught me by surprise, but I honestly kind of liked it. At first I thought it was like a glitch in the game, but then I went, oh wow, I actually have to pay attention now instead of just mashing left click and the occasional right click whenever I hear the swing. It felt nice. It felt like playing a real action game. I know that might sound like blasphemy, but like in comparison to like when I was playing Monster Hunter over this past weekend for the beta, I was like, ooh, I actually, have to pay attention to the enemy or the monster in this case. And then the other additions were the Vampire Survivor game mode at the arcade, which honestly, I kind of enjoyed a lot. Like when it first came out, I spent what, like 3-4 hours playing it, not even just for like the rewards, because I finished the rewards in a few runs, but I just kept on playing because it was fun. And then there was the HRA course thing where you had the different trial modes and stuff like that. The one thing I'm sad about is that XP gain from those courses is not an infinite source, which I feel like is kind of a waste because it's not like it even gave that much XP anyway. But I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? They want people to, spend their stamina on farming the actual stages, and then when they run out of stamina, they want you to buy more batteries so they get more money. But yeah, it would have been nice to have another source of XP though. And then of course, like, the little mini events, the redo for you. I don't even know if you could call it a puzzle event because I thought it was going to be a slide puzzle, like, where you have the one bottom right square removed or something like that. But it was literally just drag around until you get it right. And then the roaming the ether, which was very interesting. It was essentially like a kind of like a Flappy Bird mini game entirely in the TV mode. But again though, it was nice to see them they're finding ways to make TV mode sections interesting and unique and not just move around, navigate through a maze. But all in all though, I think that 1.2 was pretty great, right? The story was amazing. I can't wait to see more story. And I mean, also, if those of you who have seen it by now, there was a Yanagi backstory showing like why she's a motherly figure to Sokaku, which I honestly, again, this is gonna sound rude, but I'm just so glad that with each patch we get for the story in Zenless Zone Zero, we are not delving into the pitfall traps of Genshin and Honkai Star Rail, where, the big villain is some shadow organization from thousands of years ago who's plotting some overthrowing force, and now we need to gather the quote-unquote infinity stones and gather the sources of energy to fight back against him and stuff like that. It's just simple and straightforward. I like it. But like I said though, that is just my personal thoughts on 1.2. You're welcome to have your own thoughts that clash against mine or agree with mine. But one thing's for sure though, I think we are all very much looking forward to this upcoming patch 1.3 and what they have in store for us there. The things I'm most excited for, I think, are, aside from the story, is that tower mode. I've been looking for a challenge, and I think that might be the introduction of some serious challenge. Otherwise though, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Until next time, bye bye.